you got into wrestling. I believe you made your debut or started working in the 90s. What tell me about your training background and walk me through the process, because it's not rocket science. I mean, it's very difficult. It's very hard, to get into this.
Yeah, yeah. It's well, actually, being from a small town where I'm from, there's not too many, options. And back then, I graduated high school in '89. I started training probably in when I was 21. I met a guy. Uh, his name was Firehouse, Michael Firehouse, and he was a volunteer fireman, so his gimmick was a volunteer fireman, so it was a legit gimmick. And he had in the fire department owned a old like elementary school, so they let him set up a ring in the elementary school, and he let me. I got a hold of this guy, and I don't even remember how I got a hold of him. I found out where he lived. He lived in some little small town, Robertsville, Ohio. So I drove down there and I met him. And then I, told him I was interested in, wrestling and stuff. And he let me train his ring. And actually, an old tag team partner of mine when I first started in wrestling, Greg Anderson, he he was helping train me in there. Basically, it was me and Greg. Michael Firehouse didn't really train there with us much, so it was basically Greg Anderson was teaching me a lot of stuff. And we just did what we saw on TV, and we just, we thought we knew what we were doing. To be honest with you, wasn't really like a formal training facility. But now Greg, he trained at a guy's named Kid Collins down in Mansfield, Ohio, and I just didn't want to go that route because I didn't really have back then, the money to be driving 2 hours to go train and this and that. So I was trying to do stuff that worked for my schedule and my budget. And so Greg he did a great job teaching me the ins and outs of what he knew from his school he went to. And so then we started wrestling, and I think our first match was against, I don't know if you've ever heard of these guys, the Batten Twins. And they were a real big tag team back in the '80s and like world class, and they wrestled in Puerto Rico a lot. And they were great guys to learn from. So I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from a guy named Chris Hahn. He's from Cleveland, Ohio, and he did a lot of indies around us. And there's Lou Marconi, another guy I worked with, he was the NWA champion within the last few years. So I got to learn a lot from different guys. We worked with Iron Mike Sharp. He worked a few of our shows, and just learning from guys that have been on like WWE superstars. Where they were kind of the job guys. I worked with a lot of those guys in indies, and I learned a lot from those guys, and then I kind of evolved from there. And then I knew I had to get to the next level, and I always wanted to get in WCW or WWE, and I really didn't know how to get to either one of those. And then I'm not really sure how old you are, but back when you used to watch Nitro, the Monday Night Wars and stuff, you'd see, commercials for the Powerplant, WCW's Powerplant, where the big boys train. And that was kind of like their gimmick back then. The WCW is where the big boys play, and then the Powerplant was where the big boys train. And so, my girlfriend at the time, I told her, I said, I'm going to have to do something like this. Like, I didn't know how to get to WWE, so this was kind of right out in the open. And you just had to call the number, set up a trial. You got a 3-day trial, and then then if you made it through the 3-day trial, which was total hell, man, it was brutal, and not too many guys make it through there. And I was one of the few guys that actually made it through the power plant and then got a contract on TV. So out of the hundreds of guys, maybe thousands, there was only a handful of us that ever made it on TV that weren't handpicked already, going through the tryouts and stuff. Now there was guys like Goldberg and Paul White and guys like that, but they'd already kind of been in the system. And from the guys that actually paid the $250, did the 3-day tryout, made it through it, and then got on TV, there was very, very few of us that actually, completed the 3-day tryout and actually got a contract.
Well, whether it's WWE or WCW, you saw an opportunity and you went ahead and seized it. So that's big ups to you for being able to do that and wanting to do that. And they put you through the ringer, it sounds like, in the power plant.
Yeah, and there are a lot of videos you can go on YouTube and watch. And they did a special. It was called I think the History of Pro Wrestling. A&E did a special, and they showed the brutality of the 3-day trial. But actually, what they showed on TV actually didn't do it justice. Like there's, I've seen grown men literally crap their pants, and I'm not kidding. they would literally, it was so brutal. They were trying to make you just quit. They didn't want anybody to make it through the tryout. Well, it's not that they didn't want anybody to make it through the tryout. They wanted to make sure you had the heart, that you had the will to, to be there, and that that's what you really wanted. They wanted to weed out the guys that really didn't belong there. But on the other, the flip side of that coin was they probably got rid of a lot of good athletic talent because of the brutality of the tryout. But I had that mindset that if I'm paying $250 to do a tryout and I got 3 days to impress somebody, nobody was going to make me quit, and they didn't. So it was probably one of the hardest things I ever did in my life. And just to give you an example, there are guys that were in the Marine Corps, they were in the Special Forces, they were in Army, Green Berets. They went through the 3-day tryout and said they'd rather go back to an 8-week boot camp than do a 3-day trial with WCW ever again. So it was, and I'm not just saying that because I went through it. It was literally one of the hardest thing a 3-day tryout could be. It was, you couldn't have got any harder than what we went through for 3 days.
Well, it seems like they had you do a lot of drills, and they just worked you pretty hard, and it's just goes to show that the sport of pro wrestling, it's to be taken seriously. And
Yeah, and they took
again,
it serious, and that was another thing that they wanted to get. They're the guys that were down there training, like Pistol Pez Watley. He's an old school '80s wrestler. You had Ron Reese, you had Prince IK, you had these guys in there that took it serious, and they didn't want punks coming in there and trying to make a mockery of the sport and stuff. So you and I agree with everything they did in the tryouts because like I said, it weeded out guys that didn't belong there. And most of the guys that made it through there, man, you weren't making them quit. And no matter what you did, like for instance, I broke my nose on my tryout, my 3-day tryout. I broke my nose first day.
wow,
You know, well, after we did like probably 1,500 squats a day minimum. You're doing push-ups. It's so hot, and I did mine in July. So I don't know if you ever been in Atlanta in July, but right now, like it's been 100 degrees every day this week, man.
oh, I believe
105
it.
one day, 103 the other day. So I did my tryouts in the middle of July, and we're actually doing push-ups and sit-ups and stuff right on the blacktop outside. That's how brutal this thing was.